Hey everybody, Rachel here from Rachthestamper.com. And today we're going to be creating this card. Now this is not my card idea and I just completely perused the tutorial. However, it didn't have anyone's name on it. So this was one that was created still back when soft suede was a color, because this actually is soft suede. And then I believe this was soft suede for the inside. So I did a little bit of an update revamp for this because we no longer have soft suede. So I have a couple different samples to show you. This one actually was done with espresso and pecan. I did some using, what was this, copper clay and pecan. I did various different iterations. Here's some of the other ones as well. So I'm going to show you a couple tips and tricks that you can use for this. Now, these are also done on regular thick white paper. So, or cardstock, I should say. I'm going to do the one today on a piece of watercolor paper just to see if there's a difference. I've not ever done it on watercolor paper, but it's a pretty, I won't say it's a simple card. It does have a little bit of detail in it, but it's not awfully bad, if that makes sense. It's just that there are a few pieces that we have to die cut to get started. That's basically, I guess, where I'm going with this. One other thing, I did use linen paper here, so you can see it is pretty beat up because I tried to kind of shred it, which makes it really, really difficult to pull off. Linen paper has since retired, so maybe you still have some. So if you do, I believe this is cut at 3x4. Yes. So you could just use a little piece. I just kind of put it in the background. I think this one turned out the best, but again, it was a lot of work to get this to shred. So that just depends on what you want to do. Other thing is, I did this one ahead of time. I'm just going to use this piece, trim it up a little bit instead of doing it, but I ran this through the 3D embossing folder. This folder is unique in case you've never seen this bundle before, Sweet Citrus, and the fact that you can actually die cut these at the same time that you're embossing them. Okay, so you will see around here there's a little bit of cut marks on the folder. It doesn't affect the use, but it is a 3D embossed image, which is really cool. So this is what it looks like. I did add some Tahitian Tide. We're going to trim that down some. And we do have to do a little bit of die cutting still, but I figured maybe by using that piece, at least we'll cut down on some of what we have to do. Then we're going to do a little bit of stamping for the leaves, the flowers. I'm not adding these two things, and then the coconuts. So we're going to start with the coconuts first, because that's probably, and I use the word difficult very, very loosely. It's not difficult. It's just that sometimes if you can be particular, it may not turn out exactly how you want it the first time, but it's going to be great no matter what. So this is actually not Stampin' Up! Watercolor paper. This is Strathmore watercolor paper. The nice part about this is it has one side that's a little softer, one side that's a little toothier. Just kind of depends on your preference. I prefer this watercolor paper personally, but Stampin' Up! Does carry one as well if you really aren't new to watercoloring and maybe you don't know the difference. We're only going to ink these two images right here. So I'm just inking these with espresso, and I want to put something, just want to put something under here just to protect my work surface, because now I'm going to go over just a little bit. And I'll show you what we're going to do at the top here. Okay, and you are going to need a blender pen, preferably one that you can spare. Okay, so it's a little bit lighter. This probably needs to be re-inked because we just used this for card class. But what you're going to do, I'm going to slide this open in the meantime. The reason I say spare is because once you get these really dark, they're hard to get clean. So I have one that's dedicated to black. This one is just for espresso. So I'm just going to dip a little bit into the pen here. And I'm going to just make the little fuzzy butt features of the coconut. I guess that's the best way you can use it. Just like that. Okay, so we are going to need to hand trim this. So I'm going to close that up for now. And then I did use the pecan. Now this is the part, because we're going to need to let this sit. That's why I'm doing this now. This is the part where you want to just take your time. So I have one of our thinner water painters, aqua painter, whatever it is you call it. And I have a little bit of ink here. You don't really need much more than that. So to get started, just move this over. I have a bowl of water. And I just have a microfiber cloth, okay? So you want a really wet your brush and then just dab it off. Because first, to get started, I'm going to just go through and just wetting the color just to kind of make this more uniform so we don't have the splotches, only because this isn't inked very well. That's good. All right, so cleaning your brush. You want a little puddle of ink here. Cleaning your brush, we're going to start with the round one first. What you're going to do is going to just brush it off, and you're going to make kind of the outline of a circle. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so there we go. Just wetting your brush again. I'm going to dip a little bit into the color here, and I'm just going to touch to let the color bleed out. This is the best way to get the inside of your coconut. You do not want to add ink again until you are pretty much completely out of ink here. And then you're going to stay on one side so you have more of a shaded side. Just like so. Okay, there's one. I'm going to just clean my brush off again. And then this time I'm going to make a half circle. Same thing. Okay. And I want just a little bit more, so I'm actually going to touch the ink pad. Just like so. So you can do this with regular paper, thick white paper. The only thing is you cannot get it this wet. So you really need to be careful with the amount of water that you're laying down on your paper, because regular thick white cardstock is just not meant to hold that. So this is only damp because I have not recently wet it. So the other thing I'm going to do is just take this to the edge of my coconut ring here. And I'm just kind of touching the inside edge just to bleed it just a little bit, because coconuts aren't really like super stark white. So you can see the difference there, hopefully. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. So I have not re-wet this. I'm just kind of zigzagging, I guess you could say, just to activate that dried ink with my ever slightly damp brush. And it just gives it more of a real, let me move this over, look, in my opinion. So this you are going to need to hand cut out, but I'm going to set this on the side for a minute just so we can do a couple things in the meantime. So you can just wipe that off. I do find that personally with the water painters, aqua painters, whatever it is you call them, that I get much more control if I just use a bowl of water and just wet the tip. Personally, for me, it just gives a nicer outcome. So I'm just going to grab a couple pieces of scrap so we can make some leaves and some flowers. The leaves, I really just did it in two different colors. I'll do a shaded spruce. I think the other one originally was Pear Pizzazz, but since we don't have that color any longer, I will use, I think I did Old Olive the other day. And let me just move this out of the way so I can wipe this off. Okay, that looks good. And luckily, this does come with two die cuts. I'm going to cut both of these out, and then I'm just going to cut out some flowers. So I'm going to randomly put some of those on there. And I'm going to grab another little scrap just to put a couple more flowers through, and I'll show you what I did with the flowers. All right, so 1, 2, don't really want to use a big piece. So I don't really need that many flowers. I'm just going to pop these two on, and then maybe we'll do like one more one more flower. Actually, I think that might be enough. I have to cut the leaves one more time, so we're going to put this through and then we'll see what we have. All right, so we have our couple leaves. See if we can get any other stuff out of this while we're here. One. Yeah, that's good enough. And then I'm just going to die cut the other. Well, I wonder if I might have to do this separate because I put these things so darn close. You know what? They're going to be whatever it is that it is. They're a little close, but they might cut. Worst case scenario, they'll be overlapped a little bit, so even if they aren't, it's okay. You're not going to really see them. One. So make sure I have all my stuff. I have 2 more flowers here. Okay, and that's everything. All right, so since I already did my other part, I'm going to show you that as well. Let me just wipe this off really quickly. Go. This has been so versatile. It's funny because when I originally bought this, I was really on the fence about whether or not I wanted to buy it because I was like, how many flower? Boy, I think this has been one of my favorite stamp sets that I bought. Truly. All right, we're going to move this over. So a couple things. So we have our leaves. We have 4 of those, and then we have the rest of our flowers, which are kind of, you could do a couple different things. You could stamp them. Now, I would highly advise if you stamp them, you stamp then die cut. But I'm going to show you what I did. And I'm probably going to pick something different because my markers are running dry. So I'm going to use Flirty Flamingo. And I think I did Calypso Coral. And then if you have like a light orangish, because these are obviously orangish flowers originally. However, Pale Papaya, Grapefruit Grove, they're kind of gone. So we're going to just do the best we can. So same thing. I'm just very, very lightly off camera wetting that. And I'm going to get a little bit of Flirty Flamingo. And I'm going to just make like a little... I guess you would like the beginning of a flower here. And I'm going to do more than I probably need, but I figured worst case scenario, if we don't use them all, it's fine. And again, it doesn't really have to be perfect because you can tuck them like up and behind things. You may not even use them all, but it'll kind of give you like an idea. And also, you know, flowers in nature, granted, they do have some symmetry in some of the flowers, but they don't really have to be 100% perfect. All right, so that was the Flirty. Close that one up. And then I'm not going to re-wet. I'm just going to go in now with the Coral. And I'm going to actually try to dab some of that off. We are going to add in just a little bit of touch of dots in the center. Prior, I did this with I think it was my basic gray marker, but that one also has since bit the dust. I do need to get a couple marker refills. But you have to figure, a lot of these markers I've had them really since I started stamping. Because this Calypso Coral pad, for instance, is still the original design style. Actually, so is the Flirty Flamingo. I know Flirty Flamingo is a little bit of a newer color, but they have lasted a pretty long time. I did lose one of my blends, Daffodil Delight, at our stamp club this past weekend. However, it definitely did not owe me any money because I could tell it was one of the ones that I originally bought. And I don't really think they're supposed to last necessarily that long. So considering I used it through quite a few classes, plus all of my own stamping, and then also depending on the samples that I created. So pretty good considering. All right, so there are our flowers. Now, you do have an alternative. You could put these little dots in the center of your flowers if you wanted to, but I kind of think just a little bit of dot, and I'm going to just rinse out my brush. A little bit of dot of color is sometimes good enough. Doesn't necessarily have to be like a full on center. So I know my pebbled path is newer. We do have a newer marker tip, which is really cool. So I'm going to just put just a couple dots. This would definitely be great if we had some sort of an orange. A very, very light pale orange to still use. I'm really hoping that we end up coming back with a super light orange. I know we just had a color refresh, so I'm definitely not thinking it's going to be anytime soon. However, all right, I'm going to let these sit for a minute. And in the meantime, I'm just going to grab my bone folder and give these just a little bit of a curl. And I'm going to do one other thing to these as well. Okay, so I'm going to put these on here. And I'm going to just grab a pretty dead Wink of Stella. I save all of these because they have such nice brush tip ends. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over this and it'll kind of spread that ink color to the end so you can see. So it kind of took that white edge off, if you can see that. And it doesn't really make a difference. I'm going to go light to dark, dark to light, because if we get a little bit, I mean, leaves are definitely variegated in color. They're not solidly any color. So now I'm going to go into the old olive leaf. And back to the spruce. Was there a color aside from... I know there were a lot of people that really were sad that a few of the colors retired, but was there a color that you are specifically missing that you think would be great to include in the repertoire of Stampin' Up! Colors? If so, send me a message. Let me know. These are mostly dry, so I'm going to go ahead and start curling these just a little bit. So you do want to make sure you're pretty careful because they could rip. Just because I tend to get really crazy in there with my point. But I kind of just want to have a little bit of curve to them. Doesn't need to be a lot. Because if you think of a good color that you think would be something we can add, we always can send suggestions to demo support. They have something called a sandbox. It's basically like for your ideas. I think that was how we somehow miraculously brought back the Coastal Cabana, which is still the greatest color ever, I think, in my opinion. But it was just so much demand for it. Okay. And there we go. All right. So there are our leaves and our flowers. I should have done this ahead of time, and I didn't. So if you're going to add a little bit of Wink of Stella, I'm going to just make sure the green comes off this. You want to make sure you don't add it over the gray so you don't goof up the centers there. I'm just going to add just a little bit. Not all of them, just a couple. The other thing you could do, since we do have these new markers, now I don't have the two colors that are necessarily new, but you know what? I'm going to show you with one of these other ones. We're going to do it with Bubble Bath. Another thing you could do, these have a great tip to them. You could even give yourself just a little line of like the crease of your flower on a couple of these. Now this pink is definitely a purplish pink, but not going to be super showy. One other thing you could do that would actually be really cool, let me see. I'm going to go in just with a little bit of Daffodil Delight. Just around a couple of them. Just kind of brighten up the tips. So you don't have to put this much effort into it. I'm just thinking outside the box. Maybe you are one who doesn't really like pink as much, or Just thinking of different color things that people may or may not have. And when I make a sample versus when I do a card, sometimes I'll think of other ideas that I may or may not want to add to it. Even when you're doing like a leaf, sometimes you could add just a little bit of yellow to it because they do have variances in, you know, the overall tones and colors of all of them. Okay, so all of our flowers and leaves are done. So we're going to put them off to the side. I do need to cut out my coconuts, and I still need to actually do my sentiment. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this. And the funniest part is with doing this on watercolor paper, I have not done this before now. I don't know why I didn't think to do it before now, because it really did turn out really, really great. But you definitely get a lot more color variances with the white space on the coconuts. All right, so there's one. And really not too hard to cut out. And you technically could cut the round one. It's just that this one, you're not going to get the little, I don't know what you call it. Is it like the, it's not a frond because that's more of a leafy thing. Like the butt attachment. The coconut butt. How about that? Okay, so there are coconuts. All right, now all we have to do is pretty much just put this together. So this one, I am going to really quickly, just because I feel like when I did this before, I did it originally with dragging, and you can still see the line. So I'm going to just go over just a little bit more with my blender brush. And you kind of do want to fade. You don't want it to necessarily be completely. I do have a more of a color end and more of a white end, but this is going to need to be trimmed down. So let me grab my trimmer and we will get to assembling this, because really the only other thing we have to do is add the sentiment. So this should be 5 1/4 for, oh, it already is trimmed. How do you like that? Let's see. Yeah, I think I trimmed this just a little bit more. What is this one? Yeah, this is 3 3/4 by 5. Yeah, that's what I thought. 3 3/4. I think I'm going to take off some of the darker end. By 5. Okay. All right. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I feel like I'm missing something because I don't have a base. There we go. All right, so this will be our base. So I actually realized, and I never shared this before, so I'm going to do this really quickly, just a little sidebar here for those of you who may be new. And I'm going to do it with 2 different ones. So I was telling my ladies in Stamp Club, we were talking about card bases, etc. And it dawned on me that I never shared with them how you make card bases. So we're going to just have just a quick digression here. So you can get 2 card bases, in case you are new, out of this, either 2 lengthwise or 2 widthwise. So what you want to do, I'll show you one of each. We're going to start by scoring this one. So this is on the 8.5, on the 11-inch side. You're going to score it at 5 1/2, and then you rotate it and you line this end up right here at 4 1/4, and you cut. So then you would have 2 lengthwise card bases, or 2 hot dogs. And then the other way you can do it is, again, lining up the 8.5-inch side at 4 1/4 right here. You're going to use the light blade. The light blade is the scoring blade. Scoring at 4 1/4, and then you're going to rotate it 90 degrees, line it up at 5 1/2. Use the dark blade to cut it. These are hamburgers. So hot dogs, long and skinny, or hamburgers, shorter and wider. So you get 2 of these out of each card base. So just in case you didn't know how to do that, the other thing is, if you cut them in quarters, you can actually get 4 white pieces. So you can get 4 1/4 by 5 1/2-inch pieces. But if you want to layer them, you're actually going to want to trim them down. So then you would have 4 inches by 5 1/4. Okay, so that is here. This one actually is a little bit smaller. This is 3 3/4 by 5. And we're going to adhere this. Yep, just like this. Now, since this is a 3D folder, you definitely want to make sure you use liquid glue or a good amount of your favorite adhesive because it has a lot of nooks and crannies. So we're going to take this and center it like so. And I'm going to show you, this is the piece of linen paper. It already has adhesive on the back of it. I'm going to pull this off. You can see it will stick to itself. It is extremely sticky. If you wanted to try and rip some of the pieces off, I have to say, whoever made this card tutorial, it made it look so much easier. So what I'm going to do is just take mine and kind of wrinkle it up a little bit. Just like so, and kind of press down. Doesn't really need to be specific. And then I'm going to use this, because I can't use zesty because it's a coconut. And it doesn't really work. Coconuts are not zesty. If they are, you probably shouldn't be eating it. And I'm going to use black. Same thing again. Enjoy the sweeter things in life. I am going to use my VersaFine. This is not a Stampin' Up! Product. You can find it on Amazon though. It is an amazing pigment-based black ink. It is excellent at details. Great for detailed images, detailed words. You can see how pretty that script is. Also, you can use this for not watercoloring if you allow it to dry. You can use this for alcohol-based ink, but you just need to make sure you thoroughly let it dry. That's the only thing with this ink. Because it is a pigment-based ink, it does take significantly longer to dry. So I'm going to just continue assembling while I wait for this to dry before we trim it up. All right, so then I kind of just eyeballed where I wanted to put the rest of the stuff. I also told the ladies if there was something that you goofed up during this, maybe a part of the coconut, you could always rotate it, but I think these two turned out really cool. I'm just going to figure out where we're going to layer our pieces. So kind of just eyeballing them. Same thing over here. And then I'm going to flip these all upside down because I believe I'm going to put all of these on with mini dimensionals. So let me find, where did I move them to? I know I slid them out of the way over here. Well, oh, here they are, right in front of me. So I'm going to just use these little black mini dimensionals. I'm going to just put one in the center. No, I lied, not one. Because you can definitely put a lot of flowers on here. It really just depends on where you want to put them. And then I'm going to put one of my leaves flat and one of them raised. And on this side, I think I'm going to put both of these flat. So now we're going to just come in with some liquid glue. Since these are curled up here at the end, I'm just really focusing on gluing down this portion. These definitely are going to go up on dimensionals. And I'm just going to put a couple of them on here. Middle, and I'm just kind of looking at this for my eyeball, so I can pull these off. The only thing you might want to be mindful of is where you're putting your dimensionals if you're going to layer them on top of each other, but I think we're pretty okay with that. This here. Still trying to make sure these have a little bit of a curl up. Just going to pull off my backings. You can also add, I am not sure, I'm going to tell you what I used. I'm not sure what they're called necessarily. I had them, oh, right here. These are the Enamel Dot Essentials. I feel like these might have retired. They were almost, it was different if it was difficult. If it was navy or black and then khaki and white. So I put a couple of those down at the bottom so you could put them in if you wanted to. So now I'm going to just start pulling the backings off of my flowers and kind of build my way over to this cluster of leaves here. This is where you will decide that however many flowers you did use, you are going to use them all. Even though you're like, I'm probably never going to put this many flowers on here. You will. I'll get that guy off in a second. Because you kind of want to just start and fill in the space. And quite honestly, you could even wait to tuck your leaves in at the end if you wanted to. This really depends. And this is why I also said with the linen paper, if you don't necessarily have it, you don't really need it. Get that dimensional backing. I'm just going to give these just a final push to make sure they're all in there. Clean up all these dimensionals. I really did toil through this to decide what I thought was the better color for the coconuts. I know that sounds silly, but I really was torn of what I thought would or wouldn't be better. So I did a lot of trial and error. So I hope that you guys appreciate the fact that I really did go, I don't want to say above and beyond, but I really, oh, come on. These are like really stuck on here. I really did try to figure out what I thought would be the best. Color for the coconut. And the funniest part is I think this was great. And then once I made it this way, I was like, oh no, this is definitely what a coconut should look like. So I'm really glad that I ended up doing a redo just because it's pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and just pennant the ends of this. I'm just taking my snips, making a little flag on each one. I'm going to make this bigger just because you just never know. In case you goof it up so we don't have to stamp it again. And one other thing I noticed with this is my paper, because of how I cut it, my paper does have a little ridge line here. You probably can't see it. It's really difficult to see, but in person you can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the end of my bone folder and I'm just going to press, and it just smooths that line back down so you won't notice it. Minor detail, but you know, if you've gone this far, I'm going to just use this piece right here. Let's see. This is just a little bit too much. Yep, too much. It's not going to work. So I'm going to just pull this off. Have a little teeny bit of something showing through. Here we go. All right. And there you have it. Let me just move all this stuff out of the way and I will give you a nice clear shot of this so you can see the original versus the redo card. I hope you all enjoyed this card tutorial. It was definitely, it is a little bit of work, so I'm not gonna convince you that it's not, but it is really a pretty card. But I think the nicest part is if you did a whole bunch of these coconuts, if you did a whole bunch of die cut stuff with the flowers, you painted them maybe while you're watching television or something. I mean, I still have extra leaves left over from something else when I did this before. It's definitely something you can fit in and make the time to make it if you wanted to. And maybe even if you made like 5 of them for 5 of your closest buddies that could use a really, really pretty card, I think it would be absolutely wonderful. They would get something like this. It would definitely make them realize how loved they are. Let's keep all these things out of the way. So I thank you so very much for joining me. I will put all the measurements for this on my blog. If you're new here, you can find me at rachthestamper.com. That's my blog. If you would like to get any supplies to make these cards, you can go to rachthestamper.stampinup.net. All of the details for the measurements and everything are below here in the YouTube video. So while you're here, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. While you're subscribing, turn on the notification button so when I post a new video or something new pops up, it will let you know as well. Thank you so very much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or anything else about this, please feel free to leave something in YouTube. I do reply to every comment. I don't get a ton of them, so I definitely have plenty of time to do that. Thank you guys so very much for watching today. Oh, the only other thing I put on this one that I didn't, I was looking at it. These definitely have more Wink of Stella on them. I'm going to just put just a little Wink of Stella in the center of that coconut because I think it'll make it a little bit, just a little bit prettier. Doesn't need to be a lot, just a little something so you have a little sparkle there. So really makes everything shiny and pretty. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and I'll see you again real soon.